Let's get hyped. Welcome back to the Husker247 HypeCast, where we will get you hyped, whether you want to be hyped or not, for Nebraska's game against Ohio State, which kicks off at 11 a.m. local time, big noon on Fox. Where have we heard that before? Michael Bruntz, Brian Christopherson joins as we complete the Husker247 trio. And this week, our special guests, we go back to the well at 1620. We're going to use everybody at 1620 to get us through this season. And this week, we have John Bishop from Unsportsmanlike Conduct joining us. John drew the short straw, and he gets to be here for Nebraska, Ohio State, coming off of that Indiana loss. John, how excited do you feel?
I know what's happening here. This is actually a setup because with Viking fans in this chat and a game coming up on Thursday night, I know what this is. This is actually a setup. It has nothing to do with Ohio State.
Get him right now.
Throw away your Cooper Cup questions. He's on to us.
That doesn't matter. He's getting traded anyway.
Yeah. Well, allegedly Matt Stafford's going to the Vikings, so
that's not happening.
They're just going to change locker rooms at halftime. That's what's going to happen. Sam Darnold's going to be a Ram, and Stafford will be a Viking.
I might actually take that trade right now, just because we got to rebuild. We need someone for the future anyway.
Well, there you go. There you go. All right. Well, we're going to talk about Nebraska's future, as bleak as that might seem, with Ohio State on Saturday. The Buckeyes have lost this year. They lost to Oregon 2 weeks ago. They were on a bye week. And now Nebraska comes to town. We will start on the offensive side of the ball, as we do every single week. And we'll get this one out of the way, because I think people would be a little miffed if we at least didn't bring it up. John, what were your thoughts on Marcus Satterfield's yards per play gaffe, I guess, if you will?
It's funny. I saw my colleague, Josh Peterson's tweet, and I hadn't heard it. I just saw the text under it, and it said something about 4.0 and 6.0. And the first thing I thought of was, he must have been asked a question about, what would be a good yards per carry for your offense? Little did I know it was actually yards per play, at which point I hesitated and I said, that doesn't sound all that good. Now, I mean, I know it's been, quite popular in the last few hours to really bag on Satterfield for this, and I'm not going to sit here and try to excuse it. But it is one of those things that, if you ask a normal fan, if you just walk down the street and say, hey, what's a good yards per play? Not many people can really relate to that, right? I mean, if I told you, hey, we're averaging 30 points a game on offense, everyone can relate to that. Now, it's a little different when you're talking about an offensive coordinator and someone who typically has to set goals. I really wish there would have been a follow-up asked about, do you have goals? Do you put down goals? Because I can specifically remember going back in the day, Tom Osborne would talk about, we need to average 6 yards per run and 7 yards per pass attempt. So, I mean, those were things that were put down at the beginning of the season. So it's obvious that these weren't things that have been talked about, which makes you wonder, are they looking at different metrics? Are they setting specific goals? If they are, is it really yards based? Heck, I would have been happy if he would have done the old Bo Pelini. It's not about the yards, ma'am. It's about the points. Anything would have been probably a better answer than it is, because now it's making the rounds, and it's going to become a running joke. And on the verge of what we expect to see on Saturday, which quite frankly I'm not expecting to see much, especially on the offensive side of things. That's not going to age very well. It was already spoiled when it came out of the container, and it's going to get worse.
Bruntz, I know earlier this week you spoke about wanting to see Nebraska commit more, specifically early in games to running the football. That is one of the things that Marcus Satterfield kind of talked about on Tuesday. What do you think that potentially looks like, and how difficult is that going to be to pull off, considering this week's opponent?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be challenging. I mean, it feels like he's frequently kind of fighting the urge to just air it out. And, the other part of the press conference that kind of got lost yesterday after the yards per play conversation was him basically saying that he needs to be more committed to it, and that, you know, you need to find runs that work, and he's not going to be, you know, bullheaded and just run the ball into the teeth of the defense. But like when you dig into the PFF numbers of, you know, where runs are going, a lot of it's to the outside. I mean, they've found a lot of success, their success off tackle and outside of the tight ends. And that's outside of the reverses and things like that. But, you know, you have to be able to, you have to find a way to be able to run the ball through the tackle, between the tackles. And they just have not found anything that works there. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't need to rehash what we talked about on Tuesday, but are there power looks that they can do? Because what's being said is the goal of the offense is not being reflected in the play calling right now. I mean, when Matt Rule says this was going to be a big man game and we wanted to bring a lot of guys in, they didn't do that, and didn't give it a chance to work, because I think at times that can be something that can work for them. So I think a little bit more creativity, I think a little bit more dedication to it, and just kind of saying, like, this is what we're going to do, and we're going to call plays that reflect that, because I know they were backed up against Indiana early on, but for a group that said they wanted to run the ball, they threw the ball an awful lot in that first half. And I just don't know that, you know, Dylan standing back there and chucking the ball all over the place is going to be a good recipe. So I think they've got to find something there.
BC, we saw Micah Mazuka at left tackle. Is that a temporary thing? Do you see that as a potential home for the next 5 games? What's kind of the story? I mean, Micah Mazuka has been in the center of the conversation on Nebraska's offensive line for one reason or another, but at least at this point, we're talking about him playing. What do you see sort of happening at that left tackle spot now?
My mind's open to him being heavily involved or the main guy there the last 5 games. I mean, we'll see if that's what they want to keep with, but it's not an easy transition to go from guard to tackle midstream. But they say he's focused right now and really taking it on. I think there's a respect for the fact that he's testing himself with a challenge that can sometimes make a guy look bad if he's not used to that. And so, yeah, he played 44 snaps this past week there. I think Catula was at 36 or something like that. So I don't know if it's going to be more of the same of a 50-50 split, but definitely he's been working reps there the last 3 to 4 weeks. So I don't see why that would change now if you want to get your best 5 on the field.
Tough game, obviously, given the opponent, given the circumstances of last week. Where are you at with, and I'm talking to BC here, I don't know that I directed it. Brian, where are you at with Dylan Raiola now, coming off of 2 pretty rough games in a row, and certainly the worst game of his career with the 3 interceptions against Indiana on Saturday?
I don't think this tramples on what Bruns is saying, because I do think you have to have some commitment to the run, especially in this game, and find stuff that's portable there to take into the last 4 games while setting your quarterback up for some hopefully manageable 3rd down plays. But when those moments arrive, I'd like to see him let it rip a little bit more. I felt like it was pretty tentative against Indiana. It's not just the wide receivers and them not getting open. There were cases where there were throws, I think, that could have been made and the timing was a little off. And there's been such a concerted effort, for reasons understandable, to get back on the right side of turnover margin and avoid forcing the ball, you know, into tight spaces and all that. But I do think at some point there's going to have to be plays in this game where you're going to have to try to challenge your quarterback to make a throw like that, you know, put it in a tight spot, and your receivers have to make plays. And that's going to have to be something this offense can find down the stretch. Because I just thought against Indiana, everything just seems so sort of weak in nature. And it was just the timing was off. And I think the QB has got to step his game up a notch, just like everybody else. I think it's on everybody over there. So it's not just 10 guys are failing around him. It's got to be a whole unit thing where you look in the mirror and find a couple things you can be better at.
John, one of the conversations that came out of Saturday and has kind of been either on the message board, we talked about it on our podcast, I'm sure you've talked about it on your radio show. Do you think there's an opportunity to get Heinrich Haarberg more involved starting Saturday and potentially even using him a little bit differently over these final 5 games than what we've seen so far through the first 7, just because that quarterback run game, even as a wrinkle, has a lot of value for Nebraska?
Well, I've been banging that drum for the last couple of weeks, honestly, because and really as a way to jumpstart the running game, and I was happy to see it, albeit briefly. We did see it a couple of times last Saturday. I just think you need something. You need some kind of a spark, and if Haarberg is a better thrower, as we were told through fall camp, you still have that option. Heck, even if he hadn't improved as a thrower, you still have that option, kind of go real old school Nebraska and give an option look and then drop back and you got a tight end, 30 yards down the field, something like that. But I think absolutely you have to try different things at this point because it is what it is. This running game is kind of stuck in the mud right now and it's not really going anywhere. And so, you've got, and the good news is you haven't put a ton of it on film. I don't know how much Ohio State or anybody else on Nebraska's schedule is necessarily prepped for it or going to prep for it. Now, certainly if Nebraska does it more this week, I would expect that UCLA, USC, other opponents will have to account for it, but at least that's something else that they have to account for. So I've been very much on the side of, you've got to find some spots, and it doesn't have to be a series. It doesn't have to be, a set number of plays. It can just be a feel, kind of like it was last week where, you got a 1st and 10, you're in the red zone and, you instantly you just come out and it looked like Indiana was a little bit back on its skates. I would have liked to have seen them go quick tempo, keep him in and run it again just to see what happens. Cause I think that was the drive that ended up in the fumble. I don't recall for certain, but so it's just got to be a situation where, all right, we need to do this. Let's see if we can catch him off guard. It's just like, a great pitcher throwing his changeup. You're just trying to find something else. And while I'm not a huge fan of, having to gimmick things up to get your run game going, I would prefer that the standard run game works. We now know through 7 games, it is what it is. And so, yes, absolutely. I think Haarberg needs to be seen more often, and I hope we start seeing it this week.
Brunt, I asked you about the running game earlier. Now we're going to switch it over to pass. And what did Marcus Satterfield have to say about where Nebraska's at with their passing attack? If receivers spoke this week, what did they kind of have to say? Because Saturday was a pretty disappointing production day for Nebraska in the passing game, considering how many times they threw it and how few yards they actually accumulated.
Yeah, I mean, you're kind of also stuck in the mud there too. I mean, you don't have guys winning one-on-ones. I mean, you go back to the spring and Matt Rule was talking about how they needed to do better against man press coverage. I mean, that has not changed. And I think if you're not winning the one-on-ones outside and you're not able to run the ball with any kind of consistency inside, I mean, teams with good defensive backs can just play physical with you, get up in your face, and that's all she wrote. So he didn't talk a ton about the passing game, but I think it also just comes down to, we want to analyze everything. We want to talk about, this change and that change. I mean, at some point, a lot of this stuff comes down to just making a play. Like, you can scheme all you want, but if a guy's not able to get off the line of scrimmage, then you're toast. And I don't know if it's more Fedoni. I don't know if it's more running back. I mean, even the quick stuff to the outside is a train wreck right now because certain guys can't block outside. So that's where you are. And, you have to be able to find Dylan some throws that he can complete and that are in rhythm, because I think when Matt Rule talks about things are looking difficult or nothing's easy, it's the pass game. I mean, it looks so disjointed. Everything's late, or, you're running around and kind of trying to pull a play out of somewhere. and you just need to find something that you can do. I don't know what that is, but right now the wide receivers are not they're not doing a whole lot right now, it feels like. And I think I don't know. I mean, are we to the point where you kind of do what they did last year and just start bombing the ball? I mean, is that a bad option at this point if you can get Jalen Lloyd a free run off the line of scrimmage?
I mean, if you can get people out of the box, because like we said, teams have basically just brought everybody up again. They already know you can't run to get to the second level, and now you're struggling to get off of the line of scrimmage with your receivers. I mean, yeah, if you can get a guy who's running free downfield, throw it. At least forces somebody to have to play a little bit further back.
Yeah,
Oregon did it. I mean, that's what
yeah.
Oregon did that several times, a couple weeks ago.
Yeah. Let's jump over to the defensive side of the ball, which despite allowing 56 points has been less of the conversation, I think in part because people aren't really sure what to make of exactly what happened on Saturday. We'll start again with John Bishop. What area, given everything that you've seen through 7 games, what area of Nebraska's defense are you the most confident in right now?
I'm still confident in the line. And I know Nash, didn't seem like he was 100% for last week, but Ty's still having a fine season. I would have, we know Jamari has been, in and out and, in terms of injury, but I still think because of the depth that they have there and the ability most times to control the line of scrimmage. Now, last week, certainly Indiana blew open some holes that we really hadn't seen before, but I'm willing to give that, one time is a happening right now. This week, certainly it could start trending that way just because of, Henderson and that Ohio State run game. But I still have a lot of confidence in that defensive line that they can both get pressure and they can control things up front. Matt Rule talked about the secondary this week and, some of the issues there. And I know he mentioned, Nebraska not winning a lot of 50-50 balls. Quite frankly, I thought Rourke just had an excellent game. I thought he put the ball in exactly the right spot just about every time it came out of his hand. And sometimes when you're facing a quarterback like that, it's not going to be your day. So I'm not overly concerned, with the secondary, but I still think that the defensive line, I still have a lot of confidence in that group, and I think that they still have a lot of good games left in them.
BC, talking about that secondary, last Saturday was really one of the first times that the secondary got kind of torched. I mean, Indiana had only 4 incompletions or 6 incompletions, and 2 of them were drops, and Nebraska wasn't getting their hand on passes or really providing much resistance back there in the defensive backfield. Do you foresee any changes as they're set to take on an Ohio State team that features maybe the most dynamic set of wide receivers in the Big Ten? And, how do you think Nebraska tries to go about fixing some of their issues on the defensive back end?
They'll be forced to maybe tweak a few things just because of injury. I mean, Deshaun Singleton, it sounds like, is in the head protocol situation, and so we'll see what the final verdict is on that. Obviously, you could shift with Tommy now back in the equation, guys around where you could have Tommy at one corner, Sierra Wright at the other corner, and then Hartzog, Buford. Buford has experience all over the place, so he can move around. So maybe that's what they do. It was interesting how Tony White ran through pretty quickly some young guys that you might see more of down the stretch. Your Mario Bufords. I know Amari Sanders has been a guy they like. Larry Tarver's a name we hear sometimes. And then Bly Hill is sort of a wild card who at some point you wonder if he's going to pop back in. He's back on the field practicing at least. So those are some of the other options they could throw. But I think Singleton could be out, and you're just going to have guys play at a really high level. And as John was saying, I thought Rourke made some really difficult throws look easy. Some back shoulder stuff, which are incredibly hard to defend. And so sometimes you tip your cap and you still have to have confidence in yourself that I can cover people. And that's the only way they're going to succeed in this game is to believe what people on the outside don't believe, is that it's sort of what Rule was talking about this week, is like, okay, they have all these NFL guys. In this locker room, Nebraska feels like they have players who can play in the NFL. If you think you're that, this is a game where you go and you go toe to toe and you compete. And that's what they have to stress this week, and have that mindset that they are on the same level, even if everybody out here doesn't think they are. And it could be proven that they're far from it, but that's the way you got to go into the game, I think, to have any chance in that secondary.
Brunt, we spend a lot of time on offense talking about perimeter blocking. On defense, the bugaboo issue this year really seems to be tackling at the second level. What has, if anything, has Nebraska kind of said on that? Is there much that you can sort of do at this point, or is it just a want to desire thing for Nebraska's second, third level?
Yeah, in that game against Indiana, it seemed like that game more than others this season, it was basically like one guy was having to make a tackle, and that was it. Like, and I understand that there's going to be times when that's part of, what you have to do just by the nature of how an offense is trying to stress you. But I mean, when you've got a safety having to run up and try to fill, I mean, it's almost a 50-50 proposition at that point. So, Nebraska, when they're at their best, they're rallying to the ball. They're getting multiple guys there, and there was just way too much space against Indiana. So I think it's more about getting guys in the right spots, better angles. I mean, there were a couple big plays that they gave up against Indiana where a guy just got caught up in the wash or took a terrible angle or something like that. So I don't know that there's a huge change that needs to be made. I think it's kind of rallying to the ball a little bit better, and frankly, just getting off blocks. I mean, as much as I talk about the wide receivers needing to just make a play, like win a one-on-one as a defensive lineman, get off a block, stay in your gap, get downhill and make a play in the backfield. I mean, I as much as you kind of want to talk about where the mentality of this defense is after they got punched in the mouth by Indiana, at some point you just have to make a tackle. Like that's kind of where Nebraska's at right now, I think. Like I don't think we need to sit on the couch and kind of, assess where this defense is. Like, find some confidence, go in there and make a play.
Well, we're going to put you back on the couch, and we're going to assess special teams to give BC a little bit of a break, because he's usually the one who has to answer the question about Nebraska's special teams. Do we have any update on Tristan Alvano? Is there any potential change there at the kicker spot? Additionally, any other changes that we know of that we saw coming out of the bye with special teams, which didn't play well, but was covered up by the fact that nobody played well?
Yeah, they weren't out there a ton either. I mean, that's kind of been their saving grace the last couple games. No, I mean, I don't think there is much of an update on Alvano. He's not kicking anymore. I think they shut him down again. And, from the tone of Matt Rule going into that Indiana game, it sounded like, you're looking at a potential redshirt situation, just because, I mean, at this point, I don't know that you continue to kind of get him ready and then, do this whole snip, snap thing. So I don't know that much is going to change aside from, they had some different personnel. Heinrich Harburg was down there covering kicks against Indiana, which was unique. But beyond that, I don't know that there's much of a change there. I mean, it's going to be what it's going to be. And you're just going to kind of have to white knuckle it a little bit on every punt, because, Indiana almost got to one. I guarantee you Ohio State's going to come after one. Like that's how it's going to be. And, I think the field goal issues, as much as, Matt Rule says it doesn't play into it, I think their inability to consistently make field goals is affecting decisions on fourth down too.
BT, I saw you smiling at the snip, snap. Snap.
Nice Seinfeld throw in there. This is the least of their problems, but I'd like to just see the wave the hand on the kickoffs at the 25. Bring it to the 25. I think the data
just give away yards every single time. It is infuriating.
If you look at like data across college football, there's very few teams that have a significant edge in kick returns beyond like that sort of 20 yards, and Nebraska's at like 17 or something. So even if you're like really good at it, the best by average you're usually going to do is get it out to maybe the 28 or 30, and you risk what happened to get it stopped at the 16, or the one with Barney, I think, was just a guy losing, a freshman losing where he was on the field. So that it happened. But yeah, I'd love to see them just wave that hand.
Bishop, we'll finish up with this. What are you, I guess in a weird way, what are you looking forward to seeing out of Ohio State's offense? I mean, they have this entire compartment of weapons and various, skill position players. This is the best offensive team Nebraska will have on its schedule all year. What are you looking forward to seeing? Because it's kind of a different looking Ohio State group than what we've become accustomed to.
Well, they don't have, the uber dynamic player at quarterback. Will Howard's good, but he's certainly not, the guys that we've seen in previous years. Some of them we're watching in the National Football League. And so it kind of has changed their offense a little bit. Certainly their downhill running game is really, really good. You mentioned the two receivers earlier on. I mean, honestly, I think they've got, 4 or 5 receivers that are really, really good, and they can rotate in and out. I think, with them coming off the off week, being a little bit angry, I'll be interested to see how aggressive they are early on, or if they just say, hey, look what Indiana did running the football. We're just going to run it down Nebraska's throat and just try to, beat them into submission early. Or if they do try to air it out a little bit, because certainly, when it gets down to, they'll have Penn State coming up. They got Michigan still coming up. Not that Michigan's great, but it's still a rivalry game. And then looking ahead to, they got Indiana coming up. And then, of course, whatever happens in the playoff, their backs are a little bit against the wall. They want to be in that conference championship game so they can get that first round bye. And so, the kind of urgency that they play with now that they've lost, arguably their mulligan, I think is going to be probably the most interesting thing that I expect to see. I just hope Nebraska's ready to hit. I mean, honestly, to me, this is a Rocky Balboa game. They're Apollo Creed, you're Rocky. The only thing that Rocky had that Apollo didn't was more heart. And so I'd just like to see, that kind of effort, just go out there and hit somebody and don't even worry about what the scoreboard says. Just go out and play as hard as you can. And, if you end up losing 42-0, you lose 42-0, but at least you come out of there with some dignity, because I don't know if a lot of people came out of last week with a whole lot of dignity, and Nebraska's going to need that, because, after this week, what the conversation's going to be. Well, they were 5-3 at this point last year, and we all know what happened. So I just hope they come out with that Rocky mentality and just say, hey, we're just going to come out, we're going to take a punch, we're going to give a punch and see what happens.
Prediction time. I will get it started with an oddly specific prediction. I believe in the first quarter, Nebraska will hold the lead in this game. Whether that is because they get a stop on the initial drive and they come down and score immediately, or whether they get the ball first and they go down and score immediately. Nebraska will lead in the first quarter against Ohio State on Saturday. That is my oddly specific prediction this week.
So like 2020.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. You throw out the 62-3 game and then the really bad one they had at home in the Mike Riley era. For the most part, in the first quarter, Nebraska has played with Ohio State. It's just the rest of the game tends to fall apart. So, if it was only one quarter. Yeah. Well, the depth, the coaching, the talent, it all seems to show up in quarters 2 through 4.
Remember when they forced Ohio State to take that timeout running the fullback? Kind of got them there.
That one wasn't so great.
And then people were buzzing and the stadium was going crazy, and then
then Adrian missed a throw, an interception on the guy who's laying on the ground.
Crazy interception, yeah.
Yeah, it was.
All right, BC, you want the next one?
We're doing oddly specific. Is that what we're doing?
Yeah, oddly specific.
Okay. Nebraska on a touchdown that they get. I don't know if they're going to, how many they'll get, but Harburg is going to throw a touchdown on it's going to be like a 3rd and 4 on about the 33. He's going to fake option, pull back, throw a touchdown. If they don't run that, actually they shouldn't waste it this week, but
might need it for the Bruins.
Yeah, I'd save that maybe for one of those other ones, but I'll go with that. A 33-yard touchdown on the option pullback, old school. It's where they get Ohio State, sort of like they got them old school a few years ago with that fullback stuff before losing big.
Bishop.
All right, you want oddly specific. Here we go. Ohio State wins the toss, defers to the second half. Nebraska gets the ball first. Hopefully special teams doesn't do something that puts them in a hole, but we'll assume that they start at the touchback zone. The first play, well, first off, Gus Johnson will get into his hole, and here comes Dylan Raiola. His daddy played at Detroit. Meanwhile, the camera will be showing Heinrich Harburg coming onto the field while Gus is going through this long-winded dissertation about how Dylan is Dylan and his daddy and all this other stuff. The first play from scrimmage will be what BC said. It will be an option look. It will be a pass, 20-yard gain for Thomas Fidone on the first play. They're going to go something different just to be a little unique. And, of course, it'll still be Dylan Raiola on the field until Joel Klatt says, well, actually, Gus, that was Heinrich Harburg, the backup.
I like it. We even get a little broadcast-specific predictions in here. I appreciate that. All right, Michael Bruns.
Yeah, Nebraska is working to get Carter Nelson more involved. I think he's going to have 4 catches. They're going to find a way to get him the ball 4 times. I think there's going to be a little bit more diversity in his routes. I think pretty much, you've had like 2 that you can kind of count on with him to this point. But 4 catches for Carter Nelson. I think he's going to go for 49 yards in the game. No touchdown, I don't think, but I think you're going to come out of that game. It's going to be a nice sidebar of is the freshman ready to take off in the second half of the season?
We'll stay with Brunch. Your pick to click.
Well, I think the one guy on offense that you can kind of count on to be a gamer right now is Ja'Cory Barney. And, he's kind of been a nice piece in the running game. I think Nebraska is going to really get him involved on Saturday. So I think when all the dust settles, I think you're going to see a nice game for Ja'Cory Barney. I'm going to say that he ends up with 10 total touches on the day on offense, not counting special teams, but they're going to need their special guys to be special or at least play well if they're going to do anything. So Ja'Cory Barney is my pick to click.
John Bishop.
I liked what they did last week with Jalen Lloyd. Instead of just saying, hey, go deep and run as fast as you can, they were trying to get him the ball in space and let him do things with his legs. So I think that's going to continue a little bit. I'll go with Jalen Lloyd.
BC.
So you're right. I mean, he's gonna give up some of these receivers. There's no question, but I think he'll have a game where he's plucky and wins a few and just kind of cements that idea. Like, I like him as a gamer who wants to be out there in these kind of situations. So obviously this is going to be a tough crew to hold down, but I think he'll have some moments.
All right. I am going to go with Ramir Johnson. He will score one of Nebraska's touchdowns. That's right. I said it plural. Touchdowns on Saturday. Ramir Johnson will get one of them. He'll be the most effective running back, but he catches this touchdown. It'll be out of the backfield. All right. Score prediction. I had Nebraska with multiple scores. What does that mean for a total score prediction for me? Ohio State 37, Nebraska 13. The extra point gets blocked. BC.
Yeah, this should be framed as the battle for bowl eligibility. Ohio State needs this one to get bowl eligible as well. So there's a lot on the line. I think they'll come out with that in mind, and they're going to play with some fire. I think it's 48-14. I actually think Nebraska plays much better than last week, but I think Ohio State's going to play really well. And I think it's going to be more of a lopsided score, in part because I think Nebraska is going to go to win. Like, they're going to play like they're, not to just like Bill Callahan against USC 20 years ago out there. So I think they'll be aggressive, but 48-14.
John Bishop.
42-7. One touchdown more than they had against Iowa. It'll be kind of like that, where it was a little nip and tuck in the first half, but you never felt that Ohio State was threatened, and then they pull away third quarter, and then end up winning by several touchdowns. 42-7.
Brunts, you got the big upset prediction for us?
No, that's not me. 41-15. Ohio State. It's been interesting to listen to the topics coming out of Columbus this week. This is a team that feels like it needs to rebound from the Oregon loss. They need to prove a point, and especially going into a big game next week to get right. So I don't foresee them playing with their food like Michigan did at times in the past with matchups against Nebraska, but I think we see a 2-point conversion. I'm not saying there's going to be 5 field goals. Just to clarify there.
Well, that would be interesting. They're just going for 2 at the end of the game, down 41-7. They score and go for 2. Make it a 26-point game and not a 27-point game.
It might be a deal like the botched PAT, Darren Erstad, double extra point.
Here's your oddly specific prediction on that. It's going to be the handoff play to Bonner.
Okay. All right. I like it. Anything anyone wants to add before we end this HypeCast that we're doing, because this game is on the schedule and we do every game with a HypeCast?
I'm just praying. There's some good games in the 11 o'clock window. Navy, Notre Dame. We've got Washington and Indiana. How is Indiana going to play without Curtis Rourke? There are other options as well if things get a little out of hand. So just keep that in mind, before you throw the remote and walk outside and go wash the car.
Regardless of how it goes, you can get all of the coverage you want and need and desire at Husker247.com. We'll have plenty of coverage. Brunts and BC are going to be there. They'll be on hand. They don't have to get a flat tire this time unless the plane gets a flat tire, and I've never seen that happen, but it seems possible. And if it could happen to anybody, it would be Husker247. So for Michael Brunts, Brian Christopherson, John Bishop, I'm Mike Shaver. We'll catch you next time.